From the college by the lake, meeting the personalities and discussing the issues that affect all of Coeur d'Alene and the inland Northwest. We are the North Idaho College Public Forum. And now here's your moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Our guest today is Dr. Oskar Kallman. He is originally from Estonia, which is at the moment a part of the Soviet Union. Our guest is educated in the field of engineering, receiving degrees both in Estonia and later at the Moscow Engineering School. About 21 years ago, our guest left the Soviet Union and was in Denmark for 1 year and then came to the United States, where he has resided for the past 20 years. He now has an engineering consulting firm in San Carlos, California, and as I indicated, had been here for 20 years. Our guest also is a member of the John Birch Society and is on tour in the Pacific Northwest at this time with that organization, and he has been generous with his time to come by for this interview in our studios today. Dr. Kallman, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
And as always, I'm very, very pleased to have regular panelist Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Steve to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. I wonder if we could begin by asking you to sort of put in context for us and for our viewers the region that we're going to be talking about, and maybe tell us a little bit about the Estonia that you left and contrast that with the Estonia of today.
Well, Estonia is one of the so-called three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let's say, from 1920 to 1940, for 20 years, or a little bit earlier even, those three countries were independent and became very prosperous. The level of education in those countries was very high, but one of the highest perhaps in region or even in the world. The commerce was pretty good. The level of life was in general about the same as Sweden, Norway, Denmark at the same time. So then there were a lot of things happening in the world, and for all kind of reasons, which some of them now become more obvious, Hitler and Stalin ended into so-called Ribbentrop-Hitler Pact in late 1939, which opened the door for World War II. One of the points in that Hitler-Stalin agreement was to divide the world, or at least that neck of the woods where we were, between themselves. So Hitler got part of Poland, Stalin got Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, and part of Poland as well, another part. So Soviets came and took three small Baltic states, very much the same way as Saddam Hussein lately took Kuwait. And by the way, what happened in Kuwait very much was the same that happened in our country. So I grew up under occupation and in a perpetual wartime, if you wish. And during all that time, all the people of the three countries were considering the Soviet rule there to be an occupational rule. And depending on the situation, in the sense whether it was possible at all to voice anything, we've been always voicing desire to get independent again. And perhaps the best explains our situation and also what the major media usually knows about us, an incident that happened with one of the anchormen in a major network, who once asked a Lithuanian, why are you so adamant to get out of the Soviet Union on your own terms? Why don't you do it amicably, divorce amicably, so that Gorbachev would also save some face and all that? And the Lithuanian answered very, very straightly that if it is divorce, then you can do it amicably, but how do you divorce a rape amicably?
You mentioned the involvement of the Soviet Union and also the similarity between what happened to your country in 1939-1940 and what happened Kuwait last August. It's interesting to me that in the first case, the Soviet Union was the aggressor, the conquering nation. In this most recent episode, the Soviet Union tried to play the role of peacemaker, or at least apparently so. What's changed in the Soviet Union in those 50 years, 55 years?
Well, the Soviet Union, in this particular instance of Gulf War, played very skillfully two parts against the middle and got maximum out of it for themselves. Let's lay some groundwork to it. First of all, Kuwait is ruled by so-called Ba'ath Party. Ba'ath Party, through ranks of which Saddam Hussein rose and became a ruler in early 70s. Ba'ath Party, its full name is Arab Socialist Renaissance Party. They have two major goals with this party. First is socialism, the second is pan-Arabic goal. Pan-Arabic goal is to get all Arabic land cleared of all foreigners, including Israel, and to unite all Arabs. And the second is its socialist aspirations. So that pan-Arabic side explains why Saddam Hussein had such a support throughout the Arabic world. And the socialist side of the Ba'athi movement explains somewhat why some peace movements in the West were helping him also. Although I'm not trying to accuse the peace movements of being socialist only. Now, the Soviet Union has many reasons to meddle in world affairs, especially in that neck of the woods. But let's talk about only one reason. Let's talk about oil. The Soviet Union is the largest oil producer in the world, and right now either first or second in export of oil. Every time when oil price goes up $1 per barrel, it means $2 billion yearly for Soviet Union. And since cartel couldn't rise oil prices anymore, the next best thing was some sort of a small trouble in that region. So that was one of the things that Soviets gained from it. Now, how did Soviets do it? Well, leaving aside perhaps the Soviet role in arming and training Saddam Hussein, Soviet hand was somewhat in the planning, also the actual invasion of Kuwait. According to CIA, one of the primary Soviet war planners, General Makashov, Albert Makashov, arrived to Iraq 2 weeks prior to invasion, stayed there 2 weeks past the invasion. Starting from a week after invasion, Soviets started supply and resupply Saddam Hussein with material, more material among it. Every day from a week after the invasion, from about August the 9th, up to 2 days before Allied forces started to bomb Baghdad, 12 huge cargo ships, Soviet military cargo ships, landed every day for 6 months on that airport in the capital of Iraq, bringing new material. And Soviets have larger cargo ships than we have.
There's so many things to ask within 30 minutes, and I know that you're tying what you perceive to be the Soviet policy to Iraq and the Middle East. And I'd just like to add a footnote, or have you to respond to a footnote, and then I want to talk about some more of the status, what's going on in the Soviet Union and the Baltic republics. But in addition to the aid, military aid and so forth that's given by the Soviet Union to Iraq, other countries have been involved in this for a long time. Italy, Germany, France, the United States has also provided military aid to Iraq, particularly when they were having the war with Iran. I'd like to get your response that when different countries that have the resources to provide military weaponry, and they do so to people like Saddam Hussein, and there are others in that category, doesn't that increase the chances of this kind of conflict? is the first part of my question. And the second is, what do you perceive as the purposes for that kind of aid?
First part of your question, I'm absolutely agreeing with you. Absolutely, no question about it. Everybody who provides madman with military is doing disservice to the world. Now, the second part is a little bit away from your question, but it helps to explain my position, is that Soviets did all that, what I mentioned, send the planner there, as well as started to supply Iraq with the cargo planes, with airlift of goodies, was after the Soviets had signed all kind of, during and after Soviets had signed all those nice UN Security Council resolutions and all that. And all the world was told that the Soviet Union is no longer in Cold War with us and all that type of thing. My point was just to illustrate that Soviets were playing both sides against the middle, and showed at least one reason why.
Even though you've not been in the Soviet Union during the major changes after the death of Brezhnev and the years of Gorbachev.
I was waiting until you asked that.
But I know you have family and you have contacts, and so I'd like to get your reaction to a couple of questions. And one is that you have identified with your response to Steve's questions the Baltic republics, and we do know the historical fact that they were independent from the Soviet Union and have been in that situation since 1940. But my reading of the Soviet Union, which is very limited, but I do have some people that I talk with that have an expertise in that field, that there are other republics that are in rebellion at this time. And I want to play the devil's advocate for just a moment to say that if one was the leadership of the Soviet Union today, taking away from the issue of the Baltic republics and looking at other republics, is there a legitimate concern in whatever government there is in a country if they start disintegrating, that if one republic, two republics, or three go, that the entire country may disintegrate and it will no longer be a international power? Do you think they are looking at some of those issues that go beyond the Baltic Republic?
Why do you worry about Soviets staying international great power?
I'm not. I'm certainly not. And it's to our advantage,
Right.
I'm sure if they do not in many ways. But I'm speaking from the viewpoint of why they may be taking the stand that they are.
Al Capone and Bugs Moran would be very upset if somebody from their gang would like to break away.
Mm-hmm.
You know. They would be chastising them as well. Moreover, they would be doing exactly the same things that Gorbachev sent Yeltsin to do, to clean the stables. Because Al Capone did not like, I guess, his underlings, his lieutenants, to be carousing and drinking at the time, and stealing from him at the time when job was to be done. Well, that's the situation right now, what is happening in the Soviet Union. They are cleaning the stables, and they are regrouping. And if you look back at the history of the Soviet Union, you see that not only Soviet Union, but every single so-called Marxist group, when they took over a country, the same things happen. The countries did not become Marxist per se, because Marxism does not even teach how a country should look like or how it should be run. Very little is said. Marxism is a teaching of how rotten the capitalist system is. But they didn't teach what to do with it. And Lenin by himself, and 10 years before getting to power, he said that in questions of getting, that the most important question is to get power, and when we get it, we see what we're going to do with it. So he wasn't very sure what to do.
There wasn't a blueprint at the time.
And it has never been. When they came to power, every government of that sort improvises. And you see one improvisation after another. When Bolsheviks took over the first victim, Russia, in 1917, they started improvisation called the war communism. It was called. The thugs of Lenin were going around the country and in house-to-house search were confiscating everything they could lay hands on, and if they find something which was hidden from them, they usually executed summarily everybody on the premises. But by 1923 there was nothing to rob anymore. The country was starving, and Lenin himself told everybody in his circle that they have less than a month to survive. They have to come up with something else, and they came up with the next improvisation called New Economic Policy, or NEP for short, in which private enterprise was allowed, in which foreign capital was invited in. By the way, that was the period in which all the technical advances in Russia, in the Soviet Union, came about before the World War II through that NEP policy. At the height of the NEP, in 1927, 87% of the entire Soviet population got their living from private entrepreneurship.
May I interrupt to say, because we don't have a lot of time, but now that they went back to the collectivization and state ownership, and then with Gorbachev and with the economy being in very, very dire straits, in very serious condition, isn't there a movement now back with the perestroika and all back in that direction?
Perestroika is nothing else but a contemporary blueprint repeat of glasnost of NEP, and so on. Those, by the way, the NEP, glasnost and perestroika had been prepared starting, let's say, in Khrushchev's time already. The KGB and research institutes in Moscow were ordered to learn as much as they could learn of intricacies of the NEP time. By the way, during NEP time, just to get it in, during NEP time, during that benevolent time in which West was saying that Soviet Union is no longer communist but coming back to bosom of nations, during that time, communists consolidated their power. They built up the predecessor of KGB, they built up the labor camps and everything else, and in 1930 they decided to go to another improvisation, wall-to-wall collectivization. They did it without hesitation. And it is, in 1984, a former KGB high officer, KGB officer who defected and who was involved in preparation of those plans at the time. In 1984, he published in America a book in which he told what would come. He talked about Berlin Wall and everything else around there.
And I got to go one more question, go back to Steve because it's his turn, but in relation to what you're describing that happened in the past and the present time, I want to have one more question on the Baltic republics, because we do know that their status is different from the other republics, and the fact that you have already clearly stated that they were independent between 1920 and 1940. Do the people today in the Baltic republics find their status and their arguments for independence from a different premise than the other republics, because the rest of the republics were part of the Soviet Union for a long time?
For Western benefit, yes. For not Western benefit, it's all the same. But for Western benefit, because West considers looks back to 1940, but does not look back to 1927 when Georgia was taken over in that time. And those countries.
So there's an internal attitude and an external attitude about the independence of the republic.
If you look from the Soviet Union side, we Estonians and Latvians and Lithuanians consider themselves to be snobbish. You know, we were taken lately and we are part of the West and all that.
Yeah.
In that sense, you're absolutely right. Yeah. But the desire to freedom and the right to freedom, I assume, is equally assigned to Georgians as Estonians.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, I'd like to follow up on that line of questioning just a little bit, if I may. What do you suppose is the difference? A couple of years ago, the Soviet Union stunned the rest of the world, I think, with the liberalization move that saw freedom come to Czechoslovakia and Romania and Hungary and East Germany. I think Albania, Tony's the political scientist, will correct me if I'm wrong, they probably had the largest measure of independence of any of the Eastern Bloc countries. But those countries were released on a timetable that was just remarkable. But yet, at this point, the Soviets seem to have drawn the line, and there seems now to be a great deal of resistance to any other movement away from the central bloc of Soviet control. And certainly the Baltic states would seem to have the greatest claim to independence. What's the difference? Why yes so dramatically to all those and no to the Baltic states?
I'm not privy to the intricacies of preparation of those improvisations.
Is there something economically, though, about the Baltic states that's vitally important to the Soviet Union?
Economically, everything is important. They are parasites, living on all the colonies they took, as well as living on the West. By the way, there was a nice research done by Professor Anthony Sutton about trade with the Soviet Union in 50s and 60s. And it shows that there is, for instance, no such thing as a marine diesel engine, Soviet diesel. Everything really, but they put together hardware of warfare. has come from the West.
Well, let me shift my questioning just a little bit then, although I think it's still somewhat related. You mentioned in our earlier conversation that that we are seeing Soviet policy recycled presently. I think there was a great deal of hope 2 years ago when all of the independence movement started that this really was a new age in the Soviet Union and an age where detente could be accepted. Lately, I think we're pulling back a little bit on that view as we see some of the new developments in the Soviet Union. Are you suspicious of the liberalization trend? Do you think that's something that has been conveniently put on and can be taken off just as easily?
It's another improvisation, sir, and the next improvisation might be all-out war. If you judge the Soviet Union by the commerce or how the people are living there, and even in the best times of 80s, an average Soviet citizen earned twice less than an average black in South Africa. So, arguing from all that, the way of life, the commerce in that country, it is a third world country. But from military point of view, it is something else. It has arsenal of atomic weapons equal to ours. It has 215 combat-ready divisions, whereas we have only 16. It has 5-to-1 superiority in tanks. And those tanks in the Soviet Union are not those tanks that Turkey shoot down during the Kuwait, within the Iraq war. They have superiority in artillery pieces 10-to-1. They have 14 chemical and 8 biological weapon factories. We have none. And I can go on and on. And even in that benevolent time right now, or hardship from them economically, they have just assigned $18 billion for building new 9 Typhoon-class first attack submarines. All that is happening right now. The KGB has not been reduced a single person. There are still at least 2,000 labor camps in the Soviet Union, no matter what 60 Minutes say.
Another couple of pieces of data, however, is that many people are contending, and I know the point that you've made, but that out of the Gulf War, there was a lot of countries around the world, including our own military experts, that were impressed with the efficiency of the modern warfare that the United States has, and that a lot of the equipment and all that they faced was Soviet-built equipment, and it was one of the most incredible statistics about the less than 100 American lives were lost, and we don't know the figure for Iraq, but we hear even figures of 150,000. So in that light, is it not possible that it doesn't depend solely upon who has the most tanks, etc., but who has the most modern, efficient, computerized warfare?
Agreed. Totally agreed. Moreover, there is no doubt I had the same lump as you had in your throat when I was watching TV. Of course it was a great thing. However, Soviets never gave more than only a handful of the latest tanks to Iraq. Others were Turkish shoot. They could be shot much before they even can start aiming at us. Now, that is Soviets are not Iraqis. And by the way, General Schwarzkopf was pointing finger by finger, the military qualities of Saddam Hussein as military thinker, and he came to the conclusion it wasn't much. So
I have a second point, too, to deal with that I think is really significant from the data that are available. There are things that have gone on in the Soviet Union in the last 5 to 7 years that are very different, and you've indicated that some of the economic changes back to what you said was an earlier plan. But the fact that the Soviet Union, for whatever the reasons may have been, were willing to stand by and observe the breaking away of the Eastern European countries such as Poland and Hungary, and the elections have taken place, and certainly something that cannot be put back in the bottle. The genie is out of the bottle in relation to the unification of Germany. That has taken place. Would you respond to the fact, and there may be more things coming with the Baltic republics, and they might have success in breaking away, even if there was to be a government installed, such as the Stalin government, they cannot go back to where they were 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, they can. They can. Tomorrow there might be another Soviet-type bloodbath very easily. There is no no guarantee against it. But let's grant that during any improvisation, the Soviet government, no doubt, is much more vulnerable than in between improvisations.
I guess if I can just interrupt,
Yeah,
though.
absolutely.
The situation in Germany, once that unification takes place, and Germany is a strong country.
Oh, yeah, it's gone, it's gone.
That's done, isn't it?
Oh, sure, of course, no doubt about that. But Soviets sold that piece of real estate with the slaves attached to it pretty well, didn't they? The bill of sale was very much favored for the Soviet side. And by the way, in addition to all that, Germany now is picking up a tab for keeping up about as many Soviets in German soil, Soviet armies, as we had for 6 months in Kuwait. So they have over 300,000 Soviet troops with entire armament that goes with it, paid by and kept up by the West Germans. Now, West Germans are even so good that now they go to the Soviet Union and build them houses where they go when they go away. And the Soviet Union has subscription, you know. You have to go to military for 2.5 years. So that those guys now go to housing and other guys would exchange.
We're just about out of time. I want to get you give us a prediction, but I want to make one comment before that. But it does seem that some things are happening that can dictate changes in policies. For example, the fact that they withdrew from Afghanistan was an unusual policy.
They have not withdrawn from Afghanistan, sir. They have withdrawn from Afghanistan major forces. However,
Yes.
they are right now keeping up very much the Abdullah there.
Yes, but in relation to that, they're not as successful in being able to deal with the rebels in Afghanistan because of the force they removed. But I do want to get you to make a prediction because we have less than 2 minutes. And that is, what is your prediction of what will happen to the republics, such as the Baltic republics, in the next few years?
I pray, sir, and I am a religious man, I pray for their independence.
And do you believe that will happen?
I hope, but nothing is sure when old Bolsheviks
Yes.
are. And one more thing. If even Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania and other countries who've been at least 2 generations under the Soviets get free, their governments would be very much staffed by old Soviet functionaries. So it is not cream and peaches after that either. It takes a long time for them to return to the life they knew before.
And if the Baltic republics are successful, do you think then that there is increased chances that other republics will break away, such as Georgia?
Oh yeah, it's hopeful.
Okay. One quick final note, and this is just within 20 seconds. The Bush administration has had some officials that have been very concerned that if all the republics break away, will each of those have nuclear weapons and the potential for use of nuclear weapons?
Well, I, as Estonian, may put my heart on the table that if we had nuclear weapons, there would be no chance in the world that we are going to wave them against the Western
I'm sorry
world.
to interrupt. Thank you very much, Dr. Oskar Kullman, for being with us, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed our program, that you'll be with us again next week at this same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum is videotaped live by Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to catch the North Idaho College Public Forum the same time next week on this television station.